There's the Garenbrig. What is it with me and called shots when it comes to Castle Garenbrig, especially when we have so few of them in the deck? Get another Valka trigger because why not? Do we just have them dead? Yeah, we can ghost court our own Flagstones and they're just literally dead, so that's cool. Hello and welcome everybody. Today we have a league with another more serious list. Today we are playing some Reclaimer Amulet. That is right. If you're not up with the current trends in amulettitan, the more recent placing lists and modern challenges, in several cases by the same person, which we'll learn about in a second, have all been including 4 copies of Elvish Reclaimer, of course, the 1 mana, 1/2 that does it all. The 2 mana ability, activate, tap it, sacrifice a land, search your library for land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. And of course, it becomes a 3/4 if you have 3 or more land cards in your graveyard. So for 1 mana, this is a powerhouse of a card. You can play it on turn 1. On turn 2, you can play another land, use Reclaimer to immediately give yourself access to Cavern of Souls, Bajuka Bog, Colony Garden, Ghost Quarter, these various one-of types lands that you would want to be able to see as early and as often as possible. Well, guess what? Now we have a 1 mana tutor, as long as your Reclaimer stays alive, that is. And that has a tremendous impact on the way the deck plays out, of course. Before I get into the specifics of the deck list, I want to shout out where this deck list comes from, or at least where it is based off of, and that is the MTGO user Apriolo1, also known as Anthony Priolo, as Anthony did in fact appear on Titan Talks recently, so if you want to hear exactly what this deck is accomplishing and why this deck was chosen to be played in those modern challenges and such, then you can hear it straight out of Anthony's own mouth on episode 37 of the Titan Talk podcast. I'm sure you can find it. But this is the list in particular that I based my list off of. We do have several changes in my list, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the whole idea of playing Reclaimer Amulet comes from numerous league finishes and modern preliminaries and challenges. I believe Anthony won like 2 or 3 consecutive modern challenges with Reclaimer Amulet, and so here we are to try it out. So that is where this list is from. Now let's talk about some of the list. The main deck, I will say, is not very changed at all. So, of course, when you're playing Elvish Reclaimer, naturally you want to play the card Flagstones of Trocaire as well. It's a white land that lets you search for a plains card when it leaves the battlefield, basically. So you sack it to a Reclaimer, it replaces itself with a plains card from your deck, and then you still get to search from the Reclaimer, so this basically turns your Elvish Reclaimer activations into ramp, of course. And that's going to be one of the key interactions here, the engine, so to speak, of the Reclaimer deck. And then, of course, now we're playing a ton of Shocklands in the main deck. In addition to the Breeding Pool, we also see 3 copies of Temple Garden. At least these are untapped green sources for turn 1 1-drops, such as Grazer and Reclaimer. But, of course, it comes at the price of having to pay some life. So we do make some concessions in the mana base. Definitely, Flagstones and Temple Garden are the worst cards in the mana base, but they are a necessary evil. Flagstones by itself is not a fantastic card. Amulet doesn't really have use for any white sources, other than maybe a one-time activation of Slayer's Stronghold, perhaps. So it might as well just be a colorless source. It doesn't play your Reclaimers or Grazers on turn 1, which is quite the problem. And this means that we don't get to play cards like Castle Garenbrig. We only get 1 of to search for with Reclaimer to set up a Titan off of Castle Garenbrig. We lose 1 of our bounce lands, the Gruul Turf. We are only playing 7 green bounce lands here, but hopefully that should be fine. Assuming that our Reclaimer survives, we can use it to search up a bounce land, so no big deal there. But otherwise, everything else that you would expect to see is pretty much included. We have all of the bullets that we could possibly want access to. We have double Valakut and the Vesuva. We have the Crumbling Vestige here as well. So we have all the things that we really need, and while at the same time maintaining a full 12 turn 1 untap sources for a green creature. And that is something that I love. I've been trying to keep our turn 1 untapped green sources high in the past couple leagues just because I've been very cognizant of that. And that is basically the mana base. We have all of the utility lands that you would expect and want. So let's talk about some of the main board card choices. So in the original list, the only thing that's different between my list and Anthony's list is this second Grazer in the main deck is a second Azusa in Anthony's list. Otherwise, everything else is the same. So, of course, we're going to play 4 Summoners Packs, 4 Primeval Titans, 4 Dryads, 4 Reclaimers, 4 Amulets, exactly what you would expect. We're going to be playing a couple copies of Grazer. Not only because they allow us to free up space in the sideboard, as this is one we're going to want against all the aggressive burn and prowess decks of the world that are ever present, as you will know, in today's metagame. They also allow us to pack for Grazer to go up a mana without exposing ourselves to a removal spell. So, for example, if you pack for an Azusa, planning to take 3 mana and turn it into 4 by playing a bounce land twice with an Amulet out, your opponent can respond to one of your plays of the bounce land, all the triggers in the stack, by fatal pushing or lightning bolting your Azusa, and all of a sudden, instead of going up a mana, you've gone down a mana because you spent 3 to cast Azusa and you're getting 2 out of it. So that can sometimes be devastating, and Grazer helps you play around that. But, of course, it's also just a 0-3 reach blocker, so that's going to help us gain a little bit of life against these aggressive decks, while at the same time progressing our game plan. So I chose to play a second Grazer over the Azusa, not only for conservation of sideboard space, as now we only have to play 2 Grazers in the sideboard, but also because I found that sometimes the deck lacks a bit of early ramp. Being able to play a Grazer into a Dryad, for example, so if you go turn 1 Amulet, turn 2 Grazer in a bounce land, play a bounce land again, play Dryad, that can be quite good. Sometimes you want to lead on Reclaimer, but still be able to do a lot of stuff on turn 2, and Grazer helps with that also. And, of course, playing things like Arboreal Grazer is going to be of exceptional importance in the matchups where you don't want access to Elvish Reclaimer. And this is especially prevalent in matchups like the black, grindy, fatal push strategies, where you play a turn 1 Reclaimer and it just gets bolted or fatal pushed, and it is a 1-for-1. You both spent 1 mana, so it's technically neutral, but we would rather our 1 mana ramp spell not get fatal pushed, if you know what I mean. So we need access to Grazers and Explorers, which I've included in the sideboard for matchups like that. And that's why I'm playing the second Grazer in the main board. We also do see 2 copies of Eladamri's Call. This is going to be a familiar one for anybody who's played Reclaimer in the past. Call is just extremely powerful as additional copies of Primeval Titan, so that you have more likelihood of drawing the card that you're trying to resolve the whole time anyways. Call can help you set up a Reclaimer without making you pay 4 mana like Summoner's Pact would on your next upkeep. It can let you set up a Dryad, end of turn 2, call for a Dryad, untap, play Dryad, and set up for a turn 4 Titan that way. Things along those lines. So we are going to see a couple copies of Eladamri's Call, and I will say I think that Call is probably the weakest card in the list. So if you were looking for flex slots, these 2 Calls and one of these 2 Grazers are the first places that I would look. So now let's move on to the sideboard. So in our sideboard today, we are including a few interesting choices, and the first I'll explain is 3 copies of Explorer. So, obviously, before it became commonplace to put Grazers in the sideboard, the idea of putting your traditional ramp spells in the sideboard and trying to marginally upgrade them from game 1, depending on what match you're playing against, that idea was pretty foreign, and now it's pretty normal with Grazer to make these marginal kind of upgrades, and I figured, why not give the same treatment to Explore? Explore is a card that I've always loved in Amulet. Sometimes it's the slowest thing you can be doing and you cut it, and sometimes it's the only thing you want to be doing is playing an Explore on turn 2 so that you can get some ramp and not spend a card, especially in control matchups, in mid-range matchups, anything where your cards matter and the number of cards you have matter, but you still need to get out ahead of schedule and try to resolve that Titan before your opponent can set up the perfect situation for them to be able to deal with it. So we do have Explore for that, helping us dig out from underneath discard spells like Inquisition and Thoughtseize as well. And we also see 3 copies of Tireless Tracker. This is, again, going to be for those control and grindy matchups, especially ones where your Reclaimer could be under fire. Punish them for wasting that removal spell on Reclaimer. When you slam a Tireless Tracker and start drawing cards with it, then they'll rethink their decision. We do see 3 copies of 1 mana removal spells. I've chosen to go with a split of 2 Path to Exile, because of course we are splashing white, and 1 Dismember. And the reason for this is, in the Titan Talks podcast, Apriolo mentioned that, or Anthony mentioned, that Path to Exile is potentially better than Dismember in the sideboard, specifically for the mirror, as Reclaimer is a relatively slow card, and any opponent who's playing a more streamlined Amulet list that's playing lower to the ground and faster than Reclaimer, of course, you're going to need to be able to answer their Dryad or Titan when it comes down, and Dismember does not touch Primeval Titan itself, whereas Path to Exile does, so that can be big. And also, I like the security of being able to bring in Path to Exile against the Death Shadow opponents of the world, Scourge of the Skyclaves, Sometimes Dismember is just a huge liability, as it's basically a dead card, or even worse, costs you life to use. Path to Exile does not have that downside. However, in the matchups where Dismember is good, against things like Storm, where you don't want to ramp them, we do have access to Dismember. We can hit Arbor Elf with it as well, things like that. So Dismember does have its place. We are also playing 2 copies of Force of Vigor. This is one that I've very much so been a fan of for a very long time. Being able to free answer a Blood Moon at the cost of a card, but at the cost of no green mana, so letting us get out from underneath that hate piece. It hits artifacts like Ensnaring Bridge and Liquid Metal Coating and other things that your opponent could get from a Karn board that can be very impactful, so Force is going to get the nod here. We also see only 2 copies of Engineered Explosives. This is not one that Anthony is a particularly big fan of in the Reclaimer list, and I can see why, because obviously we're playing Amulets, Reclaimers, and Grazers, all of which, on one, you wouldn't want leaving play, so I could easily see myself boarding out all of the Reclaimers and bringing in a couple of Explosives and Grazers and playing sort of a normal, quote-unquote, strategy against some of the Prowess opponents, as Reclaimer just dies to Bolt anyways, so I could see something like that. But otherwise, Explosives blowing up your own things, not really the best combo, so we are going a little shorter on that particular effect. And yeah, I believe I have covered at length everything that needs to be said about this list. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments. And of course, best of all, go check out Titan Talks, where Anthony and Fran and House of Mana and multiple other different guests come on that show and talk about various things. And more specifically, they have a more than an hour-long podcast talking about this deck in particular. So go check that out if you haven't already. And yeah, let's just jump straight into match 1 here. Well, I had some issues trying to jump into the league for a second here, and that's because I realized that the list that I currently have on the screen and have had for the beginning of this whole video is containing 16 sideboard cards. So we gotta cut one of these. And my first thought is maybe a Tireless Tracker, as we do have additional threats in the form of Reclaimer in the main deck for those control matchups, so I could see rolling without one of the trackers. I could also see trimming an Explore, but I want to give this Sideboard Explore thing a shot, so I'm going to go ahead and trim a tracker here and see how it goes. So we're playing only 2 copies of that one, not 3. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the games. Also, while I'm waiting for an opponent to connect here, I should mention that this was a suggestion from a user on the channel by the name of Reynold Ton, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but I very much appreciate the suggestion to play a Reclaimer Amulet, and so that is what we're going to do. So let's hop in here for the match. Alright, on the play. Great. Fantastic side. This hand is not that fantastic, though. We can play a turn 3 Dryad. It's also worth noting, Sanctuary and Temple Garden look very similar, so it's very easy to get these two confused. I've definitely done that several times in the past. So we could play a turn 1 Valcut, turn 2 Sanctuary, turn 3 Shock and Temple Garden, and play Dryad kind of deal. But we would need an additional untap source to play turn 4 Titan, which may not be that hard to accomplish here. If we draw an Amulet anytime during that sequence, we also get pretty well rewarded. We don't need the extra untap source that way, and we have natural Valcut to go along with the Dryad, so it's kind of close, but I'll keep it. Definitely not as fast as a turn 1 Amulet hand, but maybe it doesn't need to be. We'll play out this Valcut and pass. Might have been better to play out the Temple Garden there. Not shocked, obviously, but just play out the Temple Garden and pick it back up and play it to play our Dryad without giving our opponent the information. Ooh. Actually, now we don't even have to play out a bounce lane if we don't want to. I think getting the blocker as well is going to be useful, so we'll do this. We can then use a bounce land to reset our Colony Garden if we want to. And it does look like we're playing against the blue variety of the Prowess list, of course. Lava Dart, the plant. Well, at least we gain 1 life from it. Can't ask for too much more. And now we don't have to take damage from our lands, so that's nice. Here's a Dryad. So if we play a bounce land and pick up the forest, then we can go land, cast Titan. And with one Valakut already in play, getting a Vesuva and a second Valakut is going to be good for 3 lands. The 3 Valakuts in play times 2 lands entering is 6 total triggers for 18 damage. So if our opponent takes 1 from their Islet, that would be lethal. So we'll play out the Simic Growth here. We'll see if our turn 3 Dryad on the play hand is good enough. Probably not blocking with the Dryad here, I would say. Maybe they'll just go ahead and send a Bolt and a Lava Dart at this guy. Wouldn't be too surprised. At least if they want to cast this specific Lava Dart, they have to sacrifice it. Sacrifice a land, I mean. Which is sort of the benefit of having played Colony Garden there. So that's kind of nice. They might be very much incentivized not to kill our Dryad here, thanks to the fact that they're potentially stuck on 2 lands, so... Certainly not blocking, that's for sure. I'd rather win the game than not be able to win the game, of course. And they do have a Bolt, but they don't go for the Dryad. They were at 14. This is... I can't even see what the power and toughness on these are. 3-4. So we're looking at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We can go exactly to 1 here, unless our opponent has a mutagenic growth. I'm going to make him have it. If you've got the 0 mana spell, then you got me. Otherwise, you're dead, so... Oh, wait, we can't actually shock in the Temple Garden, so we need to top deck an untap source here for that to work. Okay, maybe that was a bit of an oopsie, but... At least we can pack for an Azusa and start playing some additional land drops. Oh, they have the 0 anyways. Okay, whatever. We were probably going to lose this game, so I'm totally fine with that. We were damned if we do and damned if we didn't. So, let's bring in our Grazers for this matchup. Probably want Dismember. Maybe not Path, though. I think Path is actually fine. It does ramp them, but ramping them is much less important than taking a huge chunk of damage from Prowess creatures. We'll bring in the Explosives as well. I'm not expecting Blood Moon from the blue-red version. It's not that it never happens, but it's definitely more uncommon, I would say. Alright, Call's a little slow here. And Reclaimers don't really help us forward our game plan at all. I also like trimming 1 Flagstones when we're trimming Reclaimers, just because they're kind of the worst card in the deck, especially without Reclaimers, so we could just call that a day. Although it might be better to trim Bajuka Bog here and have an untap source, arguably. Also, we are bringing in Path, so maybe we don't want to be cutting our white sources necessarily. We'll see if we get flooded on non-green lands here and learn a lesson, but that's alright. Yeah, I think that's about it. I don't think there's any other lands that we would want to cut or anything, so... Alright, we'll run it this way. Could see maybe trimming 1 Summoner's Pact, but... Alright, on the play, again. And we got a similarly slow hand, so we'll mulligan. Man, we just can't draw any of our 1-drops, huh? Well, at least we have Colony Garden again. It didn't work out that well for us the first time, but... We're going to be able to play Dryad on 3 and then play Colony Garden after, if we play it on turn 1 and pick it up with the Simic Growth. So, multiple chump blockers is not a bad thing. We have Valakut occurring naturally with Dryad again, so we'll keep. I think we're just bottoming the Vestige here. That would leave us with only 1 untapped source. We could also bottom the Valakut, so we have multiple untapped lands to be able to cast Titan sooner rather than later. So if we go turn 1, Colony, turn 2, Growth Chamber, turn 3, Dryad off of the Stronghold play, Crumbling, I guess we'd still need to top deck a land regardless. I think I want to keep access to the Valakut here, so I'm just going to get rid of the Vestige. I think that's fine. A Garen Brigg still completely unlocks his hand, but that makes it very sad that we're only playing 1. Opponent mulligans to 5. It's unfortunate for them. Could it be a sign that they're trying to find a Blood Moon with their mulligans? Maybe. I mean, if we get Blood Mooned and lose the game, then there's not a whole lot that we can do about that, so... We don't even have a Rex Sage in the deck. And I don't think it would have been right to play around it either, so... Our opponent has the turn 1 creature, of course. There's the Garen Brigg. what is it with me and called shots when it comes to Castle Garenbrig, especially when we have so few of them in the deck? We'll see if our opponent has Cleansing Wildfire for our Simic Growth Chamber. That would be vaguely annoying. Wouldn't be quite as bad if we could top deck a Grazer or something to help speed past that disruption. Manamorphose. Still could be Cleansing Wildfire. Still could be Cleansing Wildfire. Soulscar. Opt. Could be worse. I think we're going to go ahead and cash in our plant for 3 points of life here. Makes a Colony Garden play into better than Radiant Fountain, so I'll take it. And yeah, let's do the Dryad thing. And then we'll play Colony for extra chumps. And next turn we have Garenbrig, Summoner's Pact for Titan, play Valakut, then play our Titan. Actually, is it right to play the Valakut first? It probably is. We'll yield to this turn. Yeah, I mean, if our opponent's spending their mana this way and not answering Dryad, I actually think that we probably just win. They could have a land and Vapor Snag here, and that would be pretty annoying. There's a land. Fetching immediately, huh? Oh, they're playing out the Swift Spear. Okay, well, I think that we probably have a route to just lethal. Let's go ahead and throw a plant under the bus, because I don't see a reason not to. Let's see, so if we play Castle, cast Titan. No, we need the Valakut in play before our Titan comes into play, because otherwise our Vesuva can't copy the Valakut, as if we search for a Vesuva and Valakut with no Valakut in play, there's no Valakut in play for the Vesuva to copy. It can't copy the other Valakut because both are entering at the same time. Neither is on the battlefield yet. So we do need to play out the Valakut first here. There's no way to stack this so that we're getting a trigger from this, but if we have a Valakut in play and get Vesuva copying and another Valakut, then we only put our opponent to 1, which is not quite lethal. And I don't think there's much we can do about it. So I guess instead, we're just setting up to clear their board. Interesting. Alright, let's play out the Valakut and the Garenbrig. I almost freaked out for a second because the Valakut entered tapped, and I was like, no, we needed that to play Titan, but we're good, we're good. Of course, this Garenbrig is entering untapped thanks to the Dryad ability, making all of our lands every basic land type. We'll float the mana, we'll activate a Garenbrig, we'll cast a Titan, and I don't think there's a need to get Vesuva copying Valakut. We'll probably just get Valakut and, like, something else. In fact, if we wanted to be absolutely perfectly safe, we could get just double basic land here and kill off the 2 Soul Scars and make our opponent beat a Titan on board, Dryad plus Valakut combo, and a backup Titan in Summoner's Pact. And even if they play Blood Moon, we still don't lose. I think that's probably the objectively correct thing to do, is just to go for the basics here. So we can't get punked out by Blood Moon. I think that pretty much locks up this win almost entirely. And, I think I'm attacking. I don't see a reason to ever block with the Dryad, so yeah. Just get the damage through. Alright, opponents, do your worst. We have a 6/6 on the block. We have Blood Moon covered. We have a Titan ready to go. Soulscar Mage. Sprite Dragon. Our opponent's just dead. Cool. We will not lose to our pack trigger. That would be very nice to not do that. Alright, I guess we might as well play out an Amulet. Go to combat. The attacks are going through, so that's just game, I would say. We can get Valakut, and let's see, if our opponent Vapor snags our Dryad, then what? Then we just play Bounce Land, activate Garenbrig, second Titan, Radiant Fountain, plus something else. Oh, our opponent just concedes. They're not going to make us get the lands. Okay, that makes things a lot easier. Okay, so we managed to get game 2. I don't think there's anything we want to change. I still don't think playing around Blood Moon by bringing in dead cards is going to be good. Obviously, playing around Blood Moon when you can and it's free is nice, like we just did, but that's entirely different than actually bringing in cards that are otherwise useless on their own, so think we just run it back. We're on the draw now, which is not the best place to be against Prowess. Hopefully we get a turn 1 Grazer. Man, our deck just hates us today with all these opening hands that are completely unkeepable. Well, there's our Grazer, but now we see the downside of Flagstones coming through, as this land is useless. We can play Explosives on 1, and we have a Dismember as well to deal with a Stormwing. Like, it's not great, but I'll keep it. And, we gotta put one of these on the bottom. It probably is just the Grazer, to be honest. I think it's the Grazer. Yeah, so we can play Explosives on 1 on turn 1 off the Flagstones, and then play Ghost Quarter and crack the Explosives. Our opponent doesn't even play a 1-drop, huh? I mean, we still want to play Explosives on 1? Probably not. That might mean they have Sprite Dragon, which we could Dismember immediately. If they're planning on playing a haste creature and casting Light Up the Stage, then Dismember still doesn't play around that, because us casting Dismember onto that board would cause us to lose life. So I think we're just playing Valakut and passing. If they play Sprite Dragon, we'll just, Dismember it, play our Growth Chamber, pick up the Valakut, just live our life, move on. No big deal. If they play Stormwing, then we're not too sad about that. This is Soul Scar. Okay. I feel like they just drew this. Interesting. Well, like I said, we could play around Light Up the Stage by casting our Dismember here. The downside is then we get punked out by Stormwing Entity, which we otherwise wouldn't have an answer to. We could play Explosives on 1 and then just play Simic, so we can play Dryad this upcoming turn. And then still hold up Dismember. And I guess if they attack with the Soul Scar, we just block, except that we're losing the Dryad to... Well, no, that would be a turn from now. If our opponent has Light Up the Stage, how much do we care if they use it? I think I care quite a bit. They're on a very slow start, and we need to try to gain as much footing as possible. This Dismember might be wrong, but we'll see. And then we'll play out our Simic, trying to advance our game plan as much as possible. We really need to get this green source into play. If they Cleansing Wildfire us, we don't really care that much, because we just want the green out of it. There's the Wildfire. At least it's not happening with them with a creature in play. Alright. I guess we're just playing the Valakut. Yep. And I'm not going to play out the Explosives here. We might need to put this on 2 to deal with Sprite Dragon. That would be far more important than hitting any 1-drops our opponent could play. Of course, if they play out 1-drops and we feel like we should pop Explosives, then we can totally do that. No creature so far. That's very good news for us. Path. Okay. Now let's play out the Slayers. We'll play out Dryad. And we'll play out Flagstones so we can hold up Path. And we'll pass it back. This Path is nice because it helps cover some of the angles that we didn't have covered before. If our opponent plays a 1-drop creature, we can play Ghost Quarter into Flagstones, trigger Valakut, sacrifice, and get a couple more Valakut triggers. A Vapor Snag, that's fine. That would have been much more efficient at... actually, I was going to say that would have been more efficient at our instep, but obviously that's not true if they're trying to cast Stormwing Entity. But we, like I said, have that one covered. So on our opponent's instep, we'll cast this, giving them no information before they resolve these scries. Let's say that they see another Stormwing Entity on top, but they're like, no, we need spells to make our Stormwing go the distance. Well, now we just got rid of it. We also, whatever they put on the bottom, which they did put 2 cards on the bottom, they're now shuffled back into their deck, so they're more likely to draw something they don't want to draw. And we can play Dryad and haste it with the Stronghold, and I think that's going to be a good point. A good choice. We'll play the Forest, and I guess just Ghost Quarter. No reason to start getting frisky with the Flagstones triggers, so always yes, always yield here. We'll float a red and a white, and we'll Stronghold this guy and get in for 4, holding back the Explosives. No reason to do anything otherwise, I think. They snag it. That's fine. Whatever. We got a Valcut trigger out of it, so we don't really care that much. They pass it back. I guess they're tasting the downside of having Vapor Snag in your deck. It's really good when you're ahead, but when you're behind, not quite so much. I think I'm inclined to just play Azusa, haste and attack with it. Because I wouldn't want to give our opponent the ability to kill our Dryad, and saving Dryad plus Flagstones for Valcut triggers allows us to answer creatures, so... Although, I mean, we have explosives for that also, but... Now let's do it this way. I guess this will be worse if we draw exactly Primeval Titan, but... At least we're using the natural white tapping ability of Flagstones for something here. If they want to kill this Azusa, that's fine. Yeah, see, there we go. Got our opponent to use a bolt on a creature that didn't matter. Totally good with me. They do get to get some redraws with their eyelets, so this game is definitely not over. It's not looking great for them, but does not mean that it's over. Manamorphose. Really glad they're using it now. Let's see if they have a Stormwing. Cracking Eyelet, okay. Them having another land, especially one that's not a Fiery Eyelet, is very good news for us. Heck. Yeah, let's do the Titan thing. Sounds good to me. Again, we're just holding back our Dryad in reserve. No reason to do anything crazy. This Titan can get... What can it get? I guess just Radiant Fountain and a bounce land. Maybe we want to play around them having double bolt for our Titan, so we get Talari West and bounce land. I could see that. Let's just go for Talari West. I think we're more concerned about being able to actually end the game once it gets to that point, and less concerned about stopping ourselves from dying to something. So we'll keep, again, the lands in hand. No reason to use up these Flagstone triggers when we can otherwise use them for something different. Something more important, possibly, with the Valcut triggers from Dryad. Sprite Dragon. Sure. If they just go Bolt, Titan, whew, getting this Talari West was such a big brain move. Man, I can't even talk today. Maybe I don't need to say much. This guy speaks for himself. Got a Lava Dart targeting us. Okay. Maybe a light up the stage? No, that's just it, huh? That's all? That's what they got. Okay. Well, let's not lose the game. I think we go to combat and attack first, because we'd rather ensure that we're getting Valcut triggers from our Dryad if we can. So, and I think if we go to combat and attack, they'll be forced to Vapor Snag the Titan, pretty much. So, if they have the third Vapor Snag, then this would be the window. We're planning on killing this Sprite Dragon one way or another. Okay, let's get the Radiant Fountain and gain some life here. And I guess just a blue bounce land. Sure. It might even be to our benefit to just forget the Dryad thing, not play into Vapor Snag, and just not mess around, just kill the Sprite Dragon with EE on 2 and move on. Which I really don't hate that either. I don't think that playing Explosives instead of Dryad plays into anything, but I'm pretty sure playing Dryad plays into our opponent having Vapor Snag exactly. Oh, they're blocking with the Sprite Dragon. Okay. That's fine. I mean, we have Talari West even after our opponent potentially kills Primeval Titan, so... Like, that's fine, I guess. A Wild Slash. 2 damage to any target. Can't be prevented if they control a creature with power 4 or greater. Like, okay, sure. This is totally fine. get our Titan out of play. It's almost like we anticipated our Titan not staying in play and got a Talari West instead. You know, that does happen sometimes, though. We get to trade these guys. Our opponent has literally no resources. Yeah. This game is over. We'll keep our Ghost Quarter up so we can Ghost Quarter our own Flagstones, potentially. We'll play Radiant Fountain. Get these Valcut triggers going. And yeah, I think now's the time, pretty much, to play the Flagstones so we can go ahead and transmute this T-West. We want to keep the untapped one, obviously. So we'll stack the Flagstones trigger and then the Valcut. And we'll always deal the Flagstones. Get another Valcut trigger because why not? Do we just have them dead? Yeah, we can Ghost Quarter our own Flagstones and they're just literally dead. So that's cool. Yep. Flagstones trigger, Valcut trigger. Dude, I totally did not realize that we had our opponent dead there. That is funny. Well, that's a good-looking match for Reclaimer Amulet. We even got to see that, despite the fact that Flagstones is one of the worst lands in the deck, it does still have some utility, obviously. Multiple land triggers and all of that. In fact, on turn 1, if you play a Flagstones and an Amulet, on turn 2, then, you can tap the Flagstones that's in play for a white mana, play a second copy of Flagstones, sacrificing the old one, or keeping the new one, that is, the untapped one, and get a land. Say it's a Temple Garden. You untap it to the Amulet, and now you have the white floating, a Flagstone still in play, untapped, and a Temple Garden for 3 mana on turn 2 to be able to cast a Dryad or something like that. So, Flagstones obviously has some utility by itself, which is part of the reason why the Reclaimer engine is quite good. And we definitely got to see that a little bit in action here as we got multiple Valcut triggers off of these Flagstones. So, always love to see that. And, yeah. I will see you guys in the next match. This is Redface Menace, signing off.